Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is the appointed hour of 7 o'clock, and I'd like to call the Lexington City Council meeting to order. First item, if you will all please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all very much. I'll invite those in attendance and speaking tonight, as well as council members, when you do have the opportunity to speak, that you lower your mask so that folks can hear clearly, because not only is there a competition between the middle school basketball teams across the stage, we're competing with them noise-wise. So my apologies to those in attendance and those who may be listening at home. I don't think we're doing Facebook Live tonight because of the issue of noise and technology. But thank you all again for being here. The next item on the agenda is a public hearing. Public hearing on Ordinance 2021-10. And I'd like to call on Jen Bell to lead us through this.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The school board had a surplus of $60,596 at the end of the last fiscal year. They would like to appropriate $19,689 to operations and maintenance, with the remaining balance of $40,907 to stay in their fund balance to be reserved for future high school needs. So of the $19,000 that they'd like to appropriate, they will use it, if approved, $16,994 for roof and gutter repairs at the middle and elementary school, $700 for groundhog eradication at LDMS, and then $1,995 for video surveillance at the Waddell Pavilion and at the middle school.
Thank you, Jen. Do members of council have any questions regarding these items? I think Jen may only be able to address them from a numbers standpoint, not necessarily the detail of the means of eradicating the groundhogs or what video surveillance means exactly. But do members of council have any questions? Hearing none, thank you. I'd like to open the public hearing. Is there anyone here this evening that would like to speak to this item, which is the expenditures by the school system that were just detailed by the city finance director? Hearing none, and lots of enthusiasm in the basketball court, I will close the public hearing and ask for council's consideration.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt Ordinance 2021-10, incorporating the school's budget amendment for the first quarter of FY22.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Thank you, Mr. Ayers, for the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote. Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Ayers?
Aye.
Mr. Ziegler? Aye. Ms. Strawn?
Aye.
Mr. Alligood?
Aye.
And Ms. Alexander?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you all very much. Next item is consideration of the minutes. They were distributed with your packet. I'm not aware of any changes or corrections, and unless there's an objection, we will approve those as presented. Thank you all very much. Next item is citizens' remarks and comments, and we do invite folks from the public to join us and to speak. And I know we have two people who have signed up to speak this evening, but if you haven't signed up, you still have the opportunity to speak. We'll remind you that we ask folks to come and stand at the podium, state your name and address for the record, for the clerk to record, in the event of additional follow-up from your comments. Please make your comments to the council as a whole. We ask that you be brief, state your position, and provide facts. Additionally, provide any written statements and/or supporting materials to our clerk. and to council and the city manager. Debate is prohibited, and we ask that you speak clearly as we want to hear what you have to say. And with that, Will Mackey is first. So, Will, I invite you to come up and address council.
I'll try to stay within the 3 minutes here.
Terrific. Yes, we do try and conform to 3 minutes, if at all possible. Thank you.
I would request, Mr. Mayor and council, if I could address the issue that is actually on item 15, the new business relating to the amendment to the city code. I now made the appropriate time. Yes. I have read the memo and also have commended the News Gazette, very great newspaper that reported on this last time, and quoted the ordinance. And I'm afraid we may be missing the big picture before we move forward to another ordinance. And that being that in the page 33 of your agenda packet is the actual ordinance itself. And as it reads, if one looks at that, and you can see that it is drafted in what they call the disjunctive, not the conjunctive. In other words, it's or, A or B or C or D, not all together, which the question I think at issue here as a peddler's license or a tax is whether or not a person who's selling perishable goods, baked goods, eggs, milk, needs a peddler's license. And if one reads this, it is clear that it has adopted the Virginia Code, all right, which is, you may know, says section 58-13717, adopted 1950, of which the words of the ordinance mirror almost exactly the Commonwealth's code. And it states clearly that the license exemption applies to those who offer or sell milk, butter, perishable goods, or farm products, or produced by them and not purchased by them, which is conjunctive. So it's not required that it has to come from a farm. It has to be perishable goods. And so if we're looking at the memo, which I have, which I think spent a lot of time on, and I appreciate that, looks like it's trying to fashion a new ordinance relating to the farmer's market when I suggest that the existing statute and the ordinance clearly applies. And so my question to the council would be whether or not, before we move forward for an additional ordinance, right, that we get Mr. Jenkins as city attorney to provide the council with a written opinion that the existing ordinance, consistent with the Virginia statute, fully applies to the situation we're here. So we're not talking about T-shirts or things like that, but any item that I see at farmer's market, which are perishable goods. And thus, this statute and this ordinance clearly applies. It's in the disjunctive. And I think we've jumped ahead and said it has to come from a farm. But as we know, we have legalized chickens here. So if you want to have 10 chickens and sell eggs, you don't have a farm, you should not have to pay a peddler's license. So that would be my suggestion, my comments, and my request to the question of the city council that they consider having a written opinion from the city attorney.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mackey. Thank you for being with us and for sharing those insights. Next person signed up to speak is Kay Lira. Welcome, Kay.
Thank you. I forgot my basketball jersey. I'm Kay Lira, 502 Jackson Avenue, Lexington, Virginia, 24450. Take this off. Following that, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to read an appeal by citizens from Rockridge County and Lexington City regarding the farmers market. And it goes as follows. The city's recent decision to enforce an onerous peddler's levy on a subset of the vendors of the farmers market triggered consternation for both city and county residents. For over 20 years, the market has continued to grow and thrive by bringing a variety of quality products to the area. Residents and visitors alike flock to shop and browse the stalls, and it has become a weekly hub of friendly activity, bringing people into the city who then remain to shop and dine. It is quintessential Lexington. No commercial activity in Lexington does a better job than the farmers market, providing goods for others at low margins. Given such a bustling center, it would seem that government should be helping it thrive. Is it not the role of government to facilitate fair and robust commerce among our people? The threat of fees has just done the opposite. A picture is worth 1,000 words, and the News Gazette photo on December 8th says it all. A typically vibrant market was deserted. This letter is an appeal to you to support the market because as Democrats, we are pro-business and anti-tax when it comes to low and moderate income businesses, individuals, and families. We encourage City Council to develop a solution that enables the farmers market to thrive. Thank you for your consideration, and this was was signed by 40 concerned Lexington and Rockridge County Democrats. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kay. Appreciate you being with us. And everyone on council received the information sent earlier. And we greatly appreciate you joining us this evening. And sorry we didn't notify you to bring your basketball jersey. Those were the only two people that had signed up, but I anticipate there are other people that would like to speak this evening. If you would like to speak to council on this matter, or on any matter for that matter, please let me know. Yes, ma'am. On any matter as well that warms your heart. The two previous speakers have spoken on the farmers market. I'll recognize Ann Massey. If you can come to the podium, I invite you to pull your mask down in hopes that we can hear you. Take your time. Are there others who would like to speak this evening? Just whenever it pleases you. I think we're in the midst of public comments, and it'd be great to hear from you now. After Ann. And if you can pull that microphone down and
Okay.
speak up, we've got some
Can you
serious
hear me?
competition next door.
All right, I have a very brief statement. Good evening. My name is Ann Massey. I am retired from the law faculty at WNL. I'm a regular customer of the Lexington Farmers Market. Like so many people here, I'm sure, I'm dismayed that the farmers market may be about to lose a substantial number of the vendors who have regularly participated. When I read this statement, I think attributed to the city, I agreed with the interpretation there of the code section at hand. Now, I have to clarify, I'm not seeing the whole code section, and I'm sorry about that, but I didn't have that kind of time to prepare. But it says that the speaker had first argued that the current code is written so that non-farmer market vendors would be exempt from getting a peddler's license due to this wording. Family supplies of a perishable nature produced by them and not purchased by them for sale. That statement goes on to say that the city manager and commissioner of revenue rejected that argument. It does not explain why, and I would sort of like to know why. It notes that the council could amend the code to explicitly exempt the food-producing non-farmer vendors participating at the Lexington Farmers Market. And goes on to say, personally, I think it is wrong to treat our non-farmer vendors differently than our farmers. They are both integral to the success of the market. I simply wanted to note that as somebody who's had occasion to parse statutes before, I would agree with every part of that statement, at least as quoted, and I am having to quote here. It seems totally reasonable to me to say that these non-farmer vendors are exempt in that they produce the articles that they have for sale. They have not bought them from anyone else. They are not there buying from others to sell for resale. They're selling goods, articles, baked goods primarily, that they have produced. I don't have the full code of Lexington in front of me, but from what it's quoted, I don't understand why the city manager and commissioner of revenue disagreed with that reading of the code section. But given what is apparently a lack of clarity because people have disagreed about its meaning, it is obvious that this body, the City Council, could amend the code to make explicit that such persons who participate in the farmers market and who abide by the rules of the farmers market, whatever they may be, and they are organized in a certain fashion, as I understand, under the leadership of Mitch Wapner, that they should be exempt from having to pay a business license that the farmers don't have to pay, that all of them should be treated exactly the same. In the alternative, the suggestion has apparently arisen that one business license fee could be assessed that would then cover all non-farmer purveyors of goods at the farmers market. That certainly makes more sense than assessing a $500 business license fee against people who participate in a limited fashion, obviously, 8 to 12, once a week in Lexington for even the better part of the year, but maybe not the whole year. It makes more sense than assessing that kind of fee. Clearly, those persons selling their baked goods in that venue could not possibly afford to keep doing so if it cost them $500 a year. What I fear above all is that if we don't resolve this dilemma in a manner that is favorable to those non-farmer participants, as well as to the farmers themselves, because they all have a stake in it, and I would say we all have a stake in this. It's a very important institution to this community. If we don't, I am afraid that we could lose the entire institution of the farmers market. And for a city like Lexington, that would be tragic. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann Massey. Appreciate you being here and sharing those insights and interpretation of our code. For those who have joined us late, we are in the public comment section of our meeting, and we are competing with the basketball game. Typically, we do limit comments to 3 minutes. I do have the timer, and I will give you the 30-second notification. Mitch, you're next. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this or any other topic? I think, Brian, you raised your hand. Brian Ross? Did you want to speak after Mitch? Very good.
Good evening. I hope you can hear me. I don't know how we ended up in competition with a basketball game. Surely there could have been a thought to have this somewhere where we could have heard everything more clearly. I could not hear our last speaker, Ann. I am Mitch Wapner. I am a farmer. I'm the manager of the farmers market, and as such, I hope I can get a little more than 3 minutes because I've got quite a bit to say. I've been the manager for over 10 years at this point of the market, and from what I've been told, we have a great market. People think I'm doing a good job, and I don't think anybody questions the value of our farmers market, whether it's the social, the health, or the economic benefits to both the city, the vendors, the customers, the community at large. I think everyone will agree that having a vibrant, diverse market is a benefit to the city and everyone involved. Everyone wants a diverse and a vibrant market. If we were limited it to just farmers all selling the same thing, no one wants 20 vendors selling tomatoes. I mean, everyone wants tomatoes, but they also want bread and other items. And the market couldn't sustain 20 vendors selling just produce. It would dwindle and then it would die. So I think that it's important to recognize that our non-farmer food vendors are an essential part of our market. And I hold them on an equal status with our farmers. I don't think they're second-class citizens. I think they are equally important as our farmers for the success of this market. I also point out that, well, everyone who wants to be supportive and says they've been wanting to support our market from the mayor and the manager on down to the people here who are supporting. I do have a petition to submit with 208 names. Jim, to you? Or?
So clerk, please.
And that petition basically asks us to allow the council to agree that we should continue business for the next 20 years like we have for the last 20 years. I will now go into why I think that is the case. I also sent everybody a 6:15 a copy of the latest proposal that I was typing on after talking with Jim today. And I'm sorry you all got it so late, but I can only type so fast, and I did have farm chores prior to that when I got home. Looking at it, I want to also start by saying that the unlicensed peddlers are specifically defined by the Commissioner of Revenue and the City Manager as non-farmer vendors, understanding that the farmers are exempt. What we're talking about tonight is our non-farmer vendors. Going down with what you have in front of you, it says that I think it's wrong to treat our non-farmer vendors differently than other farmers, that they are integral to the success of the market. That's from a comment I made to Jim on December 15th. Other Virginia localities do not treat the vendors differently and exempt all market vendors from requiring peddlers' permits. Per Charlottesville, and I quote, "At our municipal markets, all vendors are exempt from a peddler's license. It is written into our city code that way. Outside of city-run markets, vendors are required to hold a peddler's license," end quote. There's a comment in here about the position of the city that's new, goes back to a previous version of this document that Jim and I and Karen have been working on. And I have to say, working with Jim and Karen, they are really committed to trying to find a win-win solution. That is, nobody loses. The city, the market, everybody wins. And I think that's very important that we have a win-win resolution, that we reach consensus. And they've been wonderful to work with. So, following what he wrote here about the position of the city to try and be fair, I have commented that in the interest of fairness, a retailer making $15,000 or less in sales annually pays $30 annually to the city, not $240, not $250. And currently there aren't any non-farming peddlers at the market that are non-exempt. But if there were, to charge them 800% of a retail license, I think is ridiculous. Per legal interpretation of the city code and agreed to by the city attorney in a conversation I had with him this morning, the non-farmer food vendors at the market are exempt from purchasing a peddler's license. The way it's written, that I did hear that part where Ann quoted that family supplies of a perishable nature produced by them and not purchased by them for sale was the exemption in the code that allows these vendors to sell. So, per the legal interpretation of the city code and agreed to by the city attorney, the non-farmer food vendors at the market are exempt from purchasing peddler's license. That means the farmer's market has been in compliance for the past 20 years, and with no action by this council tonight, the market will continue to be in compliance. Boom, end of story. That said, action by the council to amend the code to exempt peddlers who are approved vendors at the Lexington Farmers Market would, as is done in Charlottesville, explicitly allow us to continue. So that we can actually say, no question about what the code's saying, these farmers market vendors are exempt while they're at the farmers market. An approved vendor is one that has been reviewed by the market manager, at this point me, the market committee, which is 5 or 6 members of the market, and agrees in writing on their application. They have to sign off that they're agreeing to follow the rules of the market. The market manager has and shall provide the city with copies of our rules. And, if those rules change, to provide an updated copy of the rules to the management of the city. To ensure that the market does not stray from its path, that it does not deteriorate or significantly change in its makeup. And I think that's appropriate. So I would urge the city council to adopt this. Either do nothing or to adopt this change that explicitly allows vendors at the Lexington City Farmers Market to be exempt from a peddler's license. So that's my position. If you folks don't agree with that, then I am agreeable to the second proposal that Jim and I have worked on. And we spent a bunch of time working on this. I'm not saying we haven't worked on this other proposal. I don't think it's a necessary step to follow. But if it is, I did just a tweak on the wording. In number 1, amend the city code to provide a $250 annual peddler's license for the farmers market, and I add, as an entity which would cover all non-exempt peddlers, artisans, etc. So I'm trying to make it clear that the single license is an umbrella. And then in item number 2, I then repeat that by saying that peddler's license to do business in the market under the umbrella of the annual market peddler's license. And with that, I can live with that. So my goal would be for you guys to change the code to explicitly exclude all vendors from having to get a peddler's license. That to me is the answer. Barring that answer, either do nothing and allow us to continue as we have for the last 20 years, or if we have to go on this other agreement, so be it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitch, and I hope that council and community will join me in extending you additional time there to get your point and issues expressed as the market manager for the farmers market. And we appreciate you and your position and what you do for the farmers market. Brian Ross. As Brian's coming and he'll state his name and address for the record, is there anyone else who would like to speak this evening that may have something new to add? Yes, ma'am. I apologize. I'm going to have to come to you because I can't hear. But Brian, go right ahead.
Okay, wear hearing aids, so I didn't hear much of what was said before. I don't know if anybody else has that same issue. I was fortunate enough to manage the farmers market last year, at the start of 2020. Worked very closely with Jim and the Works Department to keep the farmers market going when we couldn't go indoors. He allowed us to expand the market in the parking lot. They put up new signs. We kept it going. And at that point, the peddlers that were selling their goods there were a godsend to the community. They came, they worked until 3 a.m., many of them, got a couple of hours sleep, came to the market, sold their wares. None of them sold snake oil. They all sold things that maybe you could get at Walmart or Food Lion, and customers didn't want to go there. So they were, at that point, they weren't considered peddlers. Now they are. I don't get into the code side of it. I think that's taking things in the wrong direction. The market is there to serve the community, and that's what they've been doing consistently. It also is a place that a small business or an entrepreneur can get started. When Penny and I started our business 5 years ago as a retirement project, we went to a farmer's market with our goods. We weren't charged $500. We had to pay $125 to the farmer's market to set up our stand, and then we could sell our goods. Since that time, our business has grown that we're now featured in tourist information locally. We've been in magazines. We've been on television with our business. We're promoting the area. And it all started because of a farmer's market. I know of a young lady that started in 2020, or it might have been in 2019. She is just opening up her own business in Buena Vista because she got started and got a clientele built up at the farmer's market. If she had had to spend $500 that first year to set her business up, she wouldn't be going into business today. It's going to distract people from wanting to start. We've got to support entrepreneurs, young people. There's a young lady selling at the market now who works out of her home. She makes wonderful goods. She's got 4 children. She's on the committee. She's doing all she can to bring goodness to the community. I don't need another 30 seconds. I'm about done, but thank you for listening and thank you for being here.
Brian, thank you for being here, and thanks for your leadership with the farmers market, because I know the previous couple of years you've been there and led the team while Mitch took a little bit of a back seat and had a break. But grateful for your efforts in keeping people focused on the farmers. Julia Brody, if you'd like to come forward. Again, invite you to lower your mask so that we can hear you. You don't have to, but and if you could please state your name and address for the record.
All right, my name is Julia Brody, and I live on 507 Taylor Street. I'll keep this brief. I'm almost sorry I'm here today taking up your time. I just heard about this afternoon, and I wanted to make sure I was here because I really love the farmers market. I believe it's a fixture of our community. And there's not a lot of things that I have to do on a Wednesday afternoon. So just to be clear, I'm here to support that and hope that whatever the details are, you find a way to resolve this issue in a way that allows them to keep on keeping on.
Excellent. Thank you, Julia. Appreciate you being here. Is there anyone else who would like to speak this evening? Yes, ma'am. If you'll please come forward and state your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, my name is Carol McClure. I live at 2874 Plank Road in Natural Bridge. I had no intention of talking tonight. I came here for moral support for Mitch, but I feel I need to speak up a little bit. I am one of the vendors that would be charged $500. Although I do use a few things that I grow, I make pet treats and raw pet food, I don't feel it's substantial to call myself a farmer at this time. I do support other farms by the goods that I buy to use as ingredients for a lot of my products. So I do spend a lot of money supporting other farmers, making my products to sell at the farm market. If I were to have to pay $500, I might consider not going to the farm market. I don't make a ton of money. And on top of, the other fees and the taxes, the personal property taxes to run my business, that's just another chunk of money that I don't really have to spend. I love being at the farm market. I love the community. I'm very grateful that I have the opportunity to be there and to grow my business and to serve people who come. I do see that a lot of the customers come for, a lot of the other products that people offer to sell other than, the farmers. So I felt like I needed to voice my opinion. Thank you.
Carol, thank you for being here and sharing that, and thanks for participating in the farmers market. Tara, were you wanting to speak? Please, Tara Miller. I thought I saw you jiggle over there.
You saw me nodding my head and looking at my notes.
Yes.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Tara Miller. Oh, sorry. I live at 201 Ross Road here in the city of Lexington. I have frequented the farmers market for the 17 years that I've lived here in the city. And I echo and fully support all of the comments that have been made here tonight. One advantage of going towards the end is that everybody else has made the points that you were intending to make, and rather eloquently, I might say. Have a couple of concerns that I just wanted to put on the table. I did not hear all of Mitch's comments, although he and I have spoken. Focusing on the proposed amendment to the code, there is provision 1 to provide for an annual business license at whatever fee should be determined. But it then goes on to provision or paragraph 5, which seems to me to be a very detailed and very restrictive description of the vendors who will be included, who will be entitled to participate at the farmers market. It is so restrictive, though, that it would exclude all of the allegedly non-exempt vendors that we've been talking about. So it effectively, in my reading of it, undoes the umbrella. To me, we have an umbrella. The point of the umbrella is that everybody fits under it. Paragraph 5 is so restrictive that many vendors would not fit in there, and paragraph 6 provides that those vendors would have to go out and get their own license. In any event, I just want to put that on the table for further consideration. I agree with earlier comments that really none of this belongs in the code, except the umbrella provision and the fee, if that is agreed upon, and if it's agreed to proceed in this fashion, the proviso that farmers market vendors will not be considered peddlers under the statute. Any concerns that the city has, and I've kind of read into this language, concerns that the city might have about the breadth and type of vendors participating at the farmers market, that's a perennial issue for farmers markets. And I think any concerns that the city has about that should be assuaged by the track record, the 20-year track record of the farmers market, which has done a really good job at limiting the number of vendors, keeping it primarily to farmers and other sort of agricultural pursuits and goods, and has not turned it into a flea market, which is sometimes a concern. You know, there are no T-shirt vendors, there are no antique vendors. Thank you, Frank. And there are no tuna fish sandwich vendors. I understand that was expressed at one point as a concern as well. So I think we ought to leave those determinations in the hands of the farmers market and provide that any vendor who complies with the rules and regulations of the market ought to be able to participate in the farmers market. One last very quick point. Am I out of time? You can tell me. I just want to encourage City Council to sort of weigh the gains and losses here. What will you gain by imposing a fee? I mean, okay, you'll gain a little bit of money. You know, how much will it be? Thousands of dollars. What will you lose? Yeah, I think you'll alienate a lot of vendors. I'm pretty confident you'll lose some. And I think you risk alienating the customers, all of the people who are here, all of the people who signed that petition, and perhaps tarnishing the great reputation of the city of Lexington. So I ask you to ask yourselves, is it worth it? And I would suggest that it is not. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tara. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to council this evening? Not seeing anyone else. I appreciate the comments from all the folks who are here. And at this time, I would close the citizens' remarks and comments. For those in the crowd keeping up, we will take up the new business under item 15 a little bit later, but not before we go over our reports and commissions. At this time, I'd like to call on Chuck Smith for the Blue Ridge Resource Authority.
Blue Ridge Resource Authority met on Monday. Just a quick update for council on how things are going with the landfill. Cell 2 is nearing completion and will be ready for solid waste stream input. One thing I had shared with you all in the past was the tightening of the window between Cell 1 closing and Cell 2 opening and what that gap was going to be. In fact, on Wednesday, we received an update from the director that Cell 1 looks like won't be closing until May. So we have quite a bit of cushion between Cell 1 closing and Cell 2 opening. Also, it was determined that closure of Cell 1 is not necessary at this point and is in fact a continuation of Cells 2, 3, and 4 as one solid waste landfill, and that closing Cell 1 is not a necessary step. So that should at least put off some expenditure of closure in the near term. Other than that, everything is running pretty smoothly. Revenues are down slightly due to construction and demolition solid waste dropping off quite a bit. But everything else is running right along. Any questions?
Thank you, Chuck. Main Street, Lexington, Ms. Strong.
Yes. Main Street, Lexington met on Tuesday, December 14th, and the Christmas parade was a huge success. The weather was wonderful, and the floats, bands, and dancers were great as well. And the Jingle Bell Run attracted over 200 runners. Due to the generosity of the sponsors and runners, Main Street raised over $7,000. And it's not too late to play Love Lex Lotto. You have until December 24th to turn in your card. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Leslie. Any questions on Leslie's report? Hearing none, Planning Commission.
Planning Commission met on Thursday, December 9th, and we unanimously approved a conditional use permit modification that allows the Abigail Inn Bed and Breakfast located at 408 South Main Street to increase the number of bedrooms for rent from 6 to 7, and this will come before council at our second meeting in January. We also continued our discussion to planned unit developments for mixed-use developments, and that's all I have.
Thank you, Leslie. Any questions for the Planning Commission? Hearing none, Regional Tourism, Mr. Ayers.
I'll keep this very short so we can get to the farmers market discussion. But we met on Wednesday, December 15th, and on the agenda was finalizing tourism's Arpa grant plans, which would involve 3 components. The first is a series of media tours of 8 journalists each at different times of the year. The first to be held this spring, and the last time we hosted such a large tour of journalists was back in 2017, and we continue to receive earned media from that tour, articles written in travel magazines and websites. Second component is an annual subscription to AirDNA for all 3 jurisdictions, which aggregates short-term rental listing data from Airbnb and other short-term rental sites, tracks capacity, and helps localities identify short-term rentals that are not being reported and or those that are underreporting their bookings. The third component of the ARPA spending plan is a regional event calendar that local organizations can sign up to be a part of, and once registered, anytime they post an event on their organization's Facebook page, it will auto-populate on the regional event calendar. That will be subject to moderation, of course. Somebody from tourism will have to flip a switch to have it show up, but it'll be automatic. And I believe these 3 projects will be a good use of the ARPA tourism funds, and looks like Buena Vista and Rockridge are on board too. And then the only other thing that we discussed on Wednesday was our annual sponsorship program, which in past years was basically a set aside of $9,000 to sponsor events by organizations that bring in people from outside our region. And we are discussing whether we can expand that to two-part programs as we did this year, like a first round and a second round, and upping the amount to $15,000 is what we're discussing. So those were the 2 things, and if anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Dennis. Any questions for tourism? Chuck?
A couple. If 15,000, if that's up to, is that 5,000 per jurisdiction?
No, that's a little bit different. It's 15,000 in total, and we are specifically looking for events that bring people to the region, so it's not broken out by Buena Vista, Lexington, and Rockridge, and it's largely dependent on which organizations actually apply. And it did seem like that there were more people who applied in the first round this year. We had, I believe, 9 grants that we made in the first round and only 5 in the second because there were fewer applicants, but that's because in the winter months there are just simply fewer events. But we did feel like leaving the amounts roughly equal might encourage more events in off periods, so we are going to leave it that way, I believe, next year.
Great, thank you. Where would the event clearinghouse calendar, whatever you want to call it, where will that be hosted?
Actually, that could appear on the LexingtonVirginia.com website. It could actually appear in multiple locations, and actually other sites could, if they want, host this module, I think. So it may appear in several different places.
I'll just comment that for Main Street, Lexington, for the past couple of years, we've talked about having a centralized calendar. So I think that meets a huge need of the community, and I think tourism's the right group to host that. So thank you. I'm glad that's included.
To a great extent, tourism has been hosting it, but it hasn't had the technology to support it.
Yeah, and right now everybody is posting their events on Facebook anyway, so right. You know, it just makes the whole process automatic. So it's a good strategy.
Exactly. It is not going to stop VMI and Washington Lee from having Parents Weekend or Homecoming on the same weekends because the conferences schedule those games, not the universities. But just to be clear, but a great tool to be able to cooperate and hopefully organize things much more efficiently. Thank you, Dennis. Raro, Mr. Ziegler.
No report.
Very good. Mr. Coffey's all right with that? All set. Threshold, Ms. Alexander.
Threshold has not met, but some of us did attend a Zoom seminar sponsored by Central Shenandoah Planning District Commission a week or so ago to let us know in the whole region, those of us interested in the grant they received. It is a grant that is to help any parties who are interested in affordable housing development startups. And an entity can apply for up to $400,000 to assist them in a development project. So we'll be talking about this a little further as time goes by. The only thing is, the real clincher here is that the deadline is February 3rd, and they're looking for shovel-ready projects, which we probably don't have, but we're hoping that somebody will step forward.
There might be something out there just looming, waiting to get a shovel.
Sure.
Thank you, Ms. Alexander. Any questions for Marilyn?
I have just
Yes, sir.
a quick question. In that February,
If you could speak into your mic for folks listening at home.
is this better?
Yes, sir.
In the deadline, the February deadline that you mentioned, whatnot, how would we have known that that was coming? When did they advertise that that was going to be the big day, and for us to have known that?
It was a recent request for people to consider it, and it was sent out to all of the jurisdictions that are part of the Central Shenandoah Planning District Commission.
So if you were lucky and happened to have a project ready to meet that date, you still a good chance of getting it. But if you're beginning the process, it doesn't look so good for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not sure that Lexington will be successful in being part of that, but I know that they're throughout the region, especially in the northern part of our region. I believe there are some possible proposals that are ready, shovel ready, that they will apply for.
And maybe this might be an incentive for us to get projects like this underway.
Exactly.
Get the beginnings of these things. It always takes time to put a project together, but you have to start somewhere.
You have to start somewhere, and this is a good way for us to start learning about what is involved and what those proposals will entail, so that even if we don't have anything right now, perhaps money will come down the road later, and perhaps we'll be more prepared for presenting a proposal.
So do you see if Threshold would take the lead on this to kind of be the point person or the point group to begin the discussions on where these projects might be used?
I'm hoping that Threshold would be a big supporter of whomever is going to be developing, as well as the folks that are involved in the READY grant. We're trying to work together in somewhat of a partnership and being a support to potential developers for affordable housing.
Well, if we could make that happen, that would be a great thing for us. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Alexander? Hearing none. Mr. Alligood, Maury Service Authority.
Well, we did meet 2 days ago, and it, as slowly as it seems that MSA moves on things and whatnot, the wheels have begun to turn on the project. There's a load study underway, and this is an electrical load study, to size generators for backup supply. When the work is done on the control system, which I'd mentioned at a previous meeting, is now still estimated in the neighborhood of $600,000. The engineering work has not yet been done on it, but in preparation for that control system being installed, you have to have, in terms of operational details, you have to have backup, portable backup power that comes in on tractor trailer trucks when you take all that stuff out of the system in case something happens. And so it's a project that's going to be large in scope, And so a load study, electrical load study is underway to be able to figure out how many and what size these huge generators are going to be and whatnot. But at least the project's moving ahead and whatnot. And so glad to report that. And secondarily, water usage is up. I guess the colleges are back in Lexington. The usage was, I think it was up somewhere in the neighborhood of roughly 4 million gallons in the month, this past month, over last year. And so maybe it's just because people are back, but usages are up. End of report.
Thank you, Mr. Alligood. Any questions for Mr. Alligood?
How much of a percentage increase is that 4 million gallons over the previous year? Do you know?
For the month, it's like 20%.
Okay.
And so that would align with the fact that both WNL and VMI sent kids home after Thanksgiving or prior to Thanksgiving and they weren't here between November 18th and January 10th or, we lost several thousand people.
Exactly right. And because there hasn't been any other major things happen that would use that many major leaks. And it's although we have leaks all the time, but the big use is the colleges being in session in there to do it. So that's what it would have been, and that's revenue to the city in there to do that. So that's correct.
Thank you, Mr. Alligood. Any other questions? Hearing none, from my report, briefly, wanted to recognize prior to this meeting, Business After Hours was held at Natural Bridge, and the Natural Bridge Friends meeting was held prior to that. And it, by all measures, if it hadn't been announced, I think that Chuck will be serving on that board. And the Natural Bridge State Park is a great treasure in our community. So if you haven't been to visit it lately, I encourage you to do so. They have their luminaries this weekend, and learn at the Friends meeting that disc golf is now a thing at the state park. So get your discs at Just Games in downtown Lexington and head to Natural Bridge State Park. Also wanted to share, had in my travels run to several folks with Public Works and the city staff, I should say, all who were very appreciative of the annual Kroger card and then the gift opportunity this year. It was very meaningful and greatly appreciated by several people that I spoke with. They asked to pass that along to council. And lastly, I just want to wish everyone a very Merry Christmas as we rapidly approach. I think we're now 9 days away. Tomorrow makes 8. So downtown Lexington and Lex Lotto is wide open and awaiting your shopping endeavors. So with that, I'll turn it over to the city manager.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One piece of information just wanted to relate to the community and the city council is that in City Hall over the next month, we're going to have 5 individuals out for surgery for anywhere from a week to a month. Along with our Christmas vacations, when people are off, there's going to be some empty seats and empty offices in City Hall, but we will persevere to get the work done that we need to get done. But, you may see fewer people there, and that's why. There's going to be, again, 5 staff members who have surgery of significant nature, so they will be off for at least a week, sometimes several weeks. A little information from the Communications Center. They're down 2 dispatchers now. Searching for news dispatchers is very difficult because the surrounding counties are providing higher compensation. So there's a shortage in everything today, and we're having a hard time getting dispatchers. So far, that hasn't put a pressure on that system, but it's an issue that everyone's working on, of course. Wanted to provide some information about programs in the Rockridge Regional Jail that provide work and training opportunities for the inmates and also provide them with support so when they re-enter the community, hopefully we don't see them back as customers in the jail. And I'm going to read briefly from some of these programs because they're very diverse and very interesting. Currently, the Virginia Poultry Cooperative in Rockingham County comes down every day, picks up 9 inmates, takes them to work, and brings them back in the evening because they need help up there, and we've got inmates that are able to participate in that work program. So, eye-opening that somebody would come all the way from Rockingham County to pick up workers. We have a trustee work program where workers can go out into the community. Now, it's reduced from where it was a year and a half ago before COVID, but currently there are 3 people working for the Buena Vista Public Works. There's one working here in Lexington, and there's one working with the Blue Ridge Resource Authority. So there's our people out there working for the community. Again, inmates who want to be out, who have no security concerns with them, and they go out and work in the community. We have a work crew with VDOT with 9 people on it. Same thing. They go out every day, clean up the right-of-ways, pick up trash, etc. We have internal work programs for the inmates. We have a trustee program with 1 person in it. We have an industries program with 2 inmates in it. We have a Virginia Cares Reentry program with 6 inmates, a substance abuse program with 14 inmates participating, a home electronic incarceration where you can be at home and not be in jail, 1 person in that program. We have 2 inmates, trustees working in the kitchen, 2 in the laundry, and we have a hallway, 3 hallway trustees to help us move people back and forth, inmates and others, in the jail. So they're productively engaged in such a way that hopefully, again, they transition out, they gain skills, they gain some knowledge of the value they have in the community and in themselves. So we hope that helps in many ways, and we're expanding those programs. So that's about 50 inmates. Recently, the city employees donated 6 large boxes of food and hygiene items to RARA this week, and it's for the, of course, Christmas food and products drive that RARA does. And I want to commend Janie Hostetter, who did an outstanding job of organizing and promoting this activity across the city. Just a few items, a number of items actually from Public Works to report, some of them not real positive, unfortunately. The department has reduced vacant positions from 7, which we had previously about 3 weeks ago, down to 5. We're receiving applications and reviewing them on a continuous basis. In the last 3 weeks, we've received 20 applications. We scheduled those applicants for interviews, and of those 20 applicants, 5 showed up. Of those 5, we were able to hire 3 people. So now we're down 5 positions. And of course, we are still, as I noted earlier, we had inmates working with us in our program, and they cut grass in the parks, in the cemetery, along the right-of-way. They picked up leaves, and we used to have 4 of those folks, and now we have 3. So unfortunately, some things we're behind on because we're just short people. Unfortunately, this week, if some of you have cared, taken some time and looked very carefully, our trash trucks are both down. So Public Works is using dump trucks and other trucks, plus a lone truck when it's available from W&L to pick up trash. Our backup truck has been down for weeks because we cannot get the hydraulic parts to repair it. And just this week, our primary truck went down. So Public Works is doing the best they can, patching together this service, and I hope we don't see too much disruption. But if you do see some, feel free to give me a call. We're trying to do the best we can, but potentially something could get missed. In that vein, I want to note that I've had several requests for service on items in the community that need to be looked at, and I will say that due to shortages of equipment or personnel, we're not able to get to all those things. In speaking with our Public Works Director just this week, he said, Jim, we're working with a hand tied behind our back. We just can't keep up with things. And so again, I ask that if you see something that needs to be attended to, let us know. We may, however, not get it done on a timely basis because we have to prioritize what needs to be done, what are the priorities that have to be handled now, and so some things will be delayed, unfortunately. But I do want to thank our Public Works staff because they've been working for months with numerous vacancies, and when you start shuffling people in and out of an organization, even when you fill the position, it takes them weeks or months to get familiar with the position, and you're losing another one right next to that individual who's there a few weeks later. I haven't reported to City Council recently, but I believe 2 months ago we'd already had 30 people cycling in and out of Public Works in the last year because they can do better elsewhere in most cases. We've had some retirements, but in most cases they've gone somewhere else for other jobs. I want to notify or share something I think is good news and good work by the city and the Public Works staff, is that over the past several months with COVID, we've been tracking delinquent utility bills and delaying shutoffs for our customers and putting in place payment plans for those customers who have fallen behind on their payments. In most cases, it had prevented monthly shutoff of services. And initially what we did was started with those customers who had a balance of $500 or more. Believe it or not, there were a number of customers in that category. What we asked them to do was to get that balance down to $500 or put in place a payment plan that would pay off that balance. Every succeeding month, we lowered that amount that they had to get their payments down to, or their back arrears payments down to. So the next month it was $450. So over the course of 12 months, we got every customer down to where today, this month, they were supposed to have 0 balances or they'd be shut off. Because it's Christmas, the bills just went out and they're due now. Staff and I discussed it, and we're going to leave it at $50. You're going to be shut off if you have over a $50 balance. If you get under that, we won't shut you off. Next January, we'll try and get people down to where they pay their entire bill. So I will say almost every customer paid their entire bill over that period of time instead of shutting those customers off, which would have achieved nothing. We did have a few customers, of course, who had a high bill, they were renters, and they left. But you're not going to catch those folks anyway. You can bill them and they're gone anyway. But our good customers were in a position where they could, over time, pay that bill down without losing service. The customers did what they needed to do, and our staff did what we needed to do to make sure that our customers did not suffer during this difficult time.
And let me just add that, since it's ingrained in me from RARA and the interaction with the Piovano building, that RARA, if there's a hardship that a family or a resident is facing with a water bill, RARA wants to see if they can help. That's been shared with us, and I'll share it here since you're talking about bills being passed due.
Thank you. That's been a number of cases where RARA has stepped up in some churches as well. Recently, Public Works conducted the emergency plan drill for the Morris Creek Dam. We have to conduct an emergency plan action almost annually to make sure that if something were to happen at the dam, we would know what to do immediately to safeguard the public downstream if there was a dam failure or a possibility of dam failure. And we had our regional emergency responders, Rockridge County, Lexington, and other people involved in that, should such an occurrence happen in the future. We hope not, of course, but we're ready. In the fire department, the department recently responded to a call for a person stuck in an inoperable elevator at the Rockridge Area Health Center. And access was ultimately provided through the hoistway door, and the person was able to get out on a ladder. So, very interesting. Just before that, we had 2 people trapped in an elevator on South Main Street who had to be rescued. So apparently, the last several weeks, elevators have been malfunctioning in the community. In the police department, the department's supervisory staff met to discuss and implement various activities that are now occurring. The department is bringing in 3 new employees. They're onboarding those folks and preparing to train them at the police academy. They're not certified police officers. So it'll take them up to 9 months before they can get out on the street. We are also onboarding 1 previous officer who's coming back to work for us. So with those 4 hires, we're up to full staffing, albeit we can't have 3 of those folks on the street for a number of months. The staff is also formulating the start of the Chief's Advisory Board and reviewing the current status of a possible mounted unit. I would note also that increased patrols and surveillance activities are being scheduled this month and for the following month due to the increased number of burglaries and thefts from vehicles seen at this time of year. We keep statistics on that, and unfortunately, historically, there's more thefts and burglaries than there typically are. I guess people don't feel like there's the opportunity with people being gone, maybe from the colleges, or it's just that we're all attentive to other things. We're not paying attention to our security. There are more thefts. The entire police department recently participated in a cultural diversity training, and 8 hours of training was conducted by the VMI diversity officer, Dr. Love, and I'd like to just say thank you to VMI for this excellent community service and allowing us to participate in it. Officer Taylor Fisher received training for social media management. You wouldn't think you'd have to do that with law enforcement, but it's important to watch what's going on in social media. In fact, I think you as city council members and maybe somebody in the community saw that just today we had an alert here in the schools because there were rumors or information on social media that there would be school shootings across the nation tomorrow. So monitoring that kind of information is important. all of us hope nothing happens, but we're all on alert now throughout the nation, being aware of what's happening, what's filtering through the social media out there today. The annual briefing in advance of the CARES Parade and the Sons of Confederate Veterans Parade was conducted last week, and we had a broad array of law enforcement, fire and safety, emergency management, IT, media, and public works staff who participated in that. And we want to thank all of our regional partners who did support that activity and always support us as the two events occur in the same weekend. On a very positive note, I'd like to have our Finance Director, Jen, share with us the monthly financial reports. We just got those, and we had a very good month again in November with our revenues here in the city. So, Jennifer?
Thank you. Thank you, Jim. So as Jim said, the tax collections in general have been wonderful this year, and November in particular. Sales tax collections, they were down compared to November of the past 2 years. However, year to date, we are still ahead by more than 15% in both the years. Lodging taxes remain strong. The business license taxes are about where they should be for the year. The renewals are due on March 1st, so we'll really see the money come in February. Rescue fees are exceeding budgeted expectations. Water and sewer fees are ahead of budget for the 4th month in a row. And the meals tax collections were just phenomenal this month. They were the highest they've been in at least the past 5 years. That's as far back as I went. And so we are currently 27% ahead of last year and 32% ahead of fiscal year 2020. And one last note, the Treasurer's Office collected over $2 million in real property taxes in the month of November. And for them as well, this was the highest month of collections in at least the past 5 years. And I didn't go back any further. So, any questions? Okay.
Thank you, Jen, and good to know that our neighbors are paying their bills, and obviously people are eating out and paying the meals tax. Jim, from your report, reminds me of Yogi Berra as it gets worse faster than better quicker in some instances. But we look forward to better days ahead, to be sure, for our friends in the jail as well as our local businesses. Anything else for your report?
No, sir.
Thank you. City Attorney.
Just a brief report, a brief update to say there is no update. No update on the Ballard and Parker situation, no update on the VDOT sale of the property. We're set to close in January, but that's in the state's hands at this point. So the Attorney General is drafting the deed. We're just waiting to hear back from the state on that. But as far as we know, that's all going according to plan. And that's all I have. Happy to answer any questions.
And Jared, just to confirm, that's scheduled for a particular date in January or just January of 2022?
Just January of 2022 at this point.
Okay.
No specific date.
Thank you. And Jen, you've got the check ready. Good deal. Members of council have any questions for the city attorney? All right. Next item is item 15.1, new business. And I'll call on the city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I want to start by saying thank you.
Please turn your mic on there.
Thank you again. I did want to say thank you to Karen Roundy, our Commissioner of Revenue, Jarrett Jenkins, our City Attorney, and Mitch Wapner, the Market Master, for working carefully on this item and collaboratively. A number of comments were made, and I think in many cases what each of you had was a snippet of what has occurred over the last week and a half or two when it comes to conversation and collaboration about where we needed to go collaboratively to make sure we could maintain what was happening at the market, because that has been the city's goal. There were maybe a few missteps, if you will. I think Ms. Roundy does a great job. She's very diligent, and her reading of the code was that if you had a bakery or made baked goods that did not comply with the exemption for the market. As I think one of the gentlemen, probably one of the ladies speakers, had said, that's not true. Our city attorney did give us instruction on that, and we're moving forward. Now, we've changed the briefing itself that I have in my hand 3 times since it went out last Thursday, because Mr. Wapner and I have been in constant communication. Basically, what the city is trying to accomplish is twofold. One is we want to maintain and support the market. We're there. We've got some things in place that'll make that happen. But the second thing that's important is that we license all businesses. All businesses support the activities of this community. We want to treat everyone as equitably as we can. And so there are peddler's licenses that are out there that we charge for. And there are other types of licenses. I think Mitch Wapner mentioned retail licenses. There are separate categories and definitions for those types of business licenses. And the folks who show up at the farmer's market are peddlers. That's the way they are defined in city code and state code. They've been called vendors because peddler is an old-fashioned term that none of us use. I think the one gentleman said it's been in state code for 50 years, but actually I believe our attorney said it's been there for 100 years when peddlers were more common. Our vendors today are peddlers by definition. Some of those, or the majority of those peddlers at the farmer's market are truly exempt. Some of them that have been there in the past or maybe in the future are not exempt from the the peddler's license fee. So what we put in place, if you will, is, I think as Mr. Wapner noted, some information or some clauses in, or we'd like to recommend be put in city code that would, one, allow the farmer's market committee to actually select vendors, peddlers who are not exempt from the peddler's license fee and have them at the market, provided they met the rules, regulation, requirements, expectations of the market and the city. You know, as I think one of the ladies said, we don't want a flea market there, but we're going to leave that decision-making up to the market committee. And with one $250 license fee, that's the master fee that would cover any exempt, or I should say non-exempt businesses, vendors, peddlers at the market. So in the future, if the market committee wanted to entertain, if you will, artisans, they could have artisans there. If they wanted to entertain woodworkers, you know, make some folks who made quality furnishings out of local woods, etc. One of the things we discussed, and it's already in the market rules, is that their rules say they have to be people within 50 miles. I think Mr. Wapner said they've extended that from time to time a little bit for specific vendors. So we as a community are trying to support local businesses, local agricultural, and I think the one gentleman mentioned garden products. We have garden products in what we've defined here. We have minerals and organic materials as well. If you want to use pine boughs, if you want to use holly, if you want to use those materials that could be agricultural, but they're certainly organic, you can use those to fashion articles and sell those in the market. Minerals, if there's something you're extracting, beautiful polished stones, and you make jewelry or you make some other custom item, could be sold there. So they're not just food items. And so basically, from what I gathered, and again, Mr. Wapner and I have been on the phone a couple times today, emailed each other back and forth, and I think at about 3:30 we did arrive at what we thought was a very good plan, which was the option 2 that I have in the current briefing. I understand and saw your email that you sent at about 20 after 6. I didn't have time to give a lot of consideration before the meeting, but I would say I still support and would advise City Council to go ahead and put in place a master peddler's license fee for the farmer's market so that any, of course, the peddlers that are currently exempt don't need any kind of licensing, but those peddlers who may be non-exempt in the future could be at the market for that $250 fee, and that be adopted as a new fee category under city code with that $250 fee. So if that were the case, there would need to be a public hearing at our next meeting, so that could be considered. Now, I think, again, some folks mentioned legal opinions from the city attorney, so I guess at this juncture I'd like to turn it over to the city attorney, if council would permit, to see if he has any insights he would like to share on this.
So the big question has been who's exempt, who's not exempt, and that is the question and fundamentally the issue. And I think the solution that Jim and Mitch and Karen have come up with solves that problem by basically saying that if that is put into place, it doesn't matter. that if you're exempt, it doesn't matter. If you're not exempt under the definition, you're still under this umbrella peddler's license to be at the farmer's market. So after the initial clarification that baked goods are considered the family supplies of a perishable nature and therefore would be exempt, the question is then the other item or other items that might be a bit more of a gray area or not as clear, like candles, soap, pet treats. We heard, that's family supplies, arguably. And was essentially my advice was, unless it's clearly stated there, you've got these catch-all categories, and instead of asking the city to go in, on a week-by-week, vendor-by-vendor basis and saying, okay, your soap is fine, but your candles are not, that's just going to drive everybody nuts. So I think the answer is, what Jim has proposed is just completely do away with that discussion. That I don't think there's any question that everyone there is a peddler, as defined, sort of no fixed place of business. And then this solution sort of ends the discussion. They're peddlers, yes. The farmer's market has a peddler's license. Everybody who's there under the sort of oversight of the farmer's market is there under the peddler's license, so therefore we don't have to go in and say, okay, you're not exempt, you are exempt, half of what you're selling is exempt, half of what you're selling is not exempt. It doesn't matter. If the farmer's market committee invites you in or allows you to be there under their peddler's license, from the city's perspective, the issue is taken care of. So I guess the second point is that sort of takes care of the licensing. The question of the fee, I don't think is a legal question at all. That's just a purely practical discussion between council. City managers obviously got his recommendation, but the amount of the fee or waiving the fee completely is certainly within council's discretion. But I think Jim, Mitch, and Karen have come up with the best solution, which is to include, much like Charlottesville, it sounds like does in their city code, make a specific exemption for the farmer's market and then allow folks working under that exemption for the farmer's market of the peddler's license specifically for the farmer's market is covered. So I'm happy to opine on if anybody's got questions on, the types of goods that would be considered exempt or not exempt. Happy to have that discussion, but ultimately, I think we can all see that could get into the weeds pretty quickly, especially if you're asking somebody to do that every week with new vendors. And I don't think anybody wants to be involved in that type of oversight. So I think this is a good solution, and certainly would recommend council recognizing, giving the farmer's market the ability to be a peddler as an entity, and then the question of the fee is up to council.
Thank you, Jared. I'll pose one question. With the discussion that's taken place this evening and the presentations from members of the community, currently, City Council waives the peddler's fee for certain events like the community festival and some art shows. Is it an option for City Council to say anyone that participates in the farmer's market would be exempt from a peddler's license, even though it's happening with greater frequency? Again, the city trusting, as we have in the past, the market master and organizers to have broadly defined farm products, and then continue to work on our complaint basis if the part that I've used is someone showing up and selling mattresses that they bought at Schul's as opposed to made from the alpaca that they harvested last season. Is that an option within the code and the purview of City Council?
I would say yes, that council can do that, but I think given the ongoing nature, I guess it's year-round now, so in theory, continuing duration. I think instead of sort of relatively informally waiving for the community event or the artist events, sort of one-offs, that at this point, given the discussion, it would make sense to put that in the code, go ahead and have the hearing, put that in as part of the ordinance. And now whether we want to say I guess it depends on ultimately if there's a fee. If there is a fee, have it in there, the farmer's market gets a peddler's license, here's a fee. If we don't want to do a fee, we can just say the farmer's market or any vendor at the farmer's market doesn't have to get a license. And reach the solution either way, depending on what the decision is on the fee.
But as the city manager pointed out, a process, we would need to have a public hearing and then have that perhaps explicit language for the no fee as part of the code.
Yeah, and that's been my sort of the procedural way to get to where we're going. My thought was tonight is the initial discussion, as we sometimes do, get a consensus for council to direct staff, and then we actually draft the ordinance depending on what council wants to achieve tonight, and then go through the public hearing and ordinance review process, and ultimately at some relatively upcoming meeting, relatively soon, pass the ordinance that hopefully meets what council directs us to do tonight.
Great, thank you. Members of council, what questions do you have? Or what direction do you have for the city staff?
Well,
Mr. Ayers.
Yeah, so I feel like we're at this point because we initially misinterpreted the exemption to the peddler's license. And everybody makes mistakes, and I think the city made that mistake, and we need to own up to that. And the thing that you asked, what would I like to see? And speaking personally, I think we need to make it clear that, as Mr. Mackey says, as the law exists right now, the vendors at the farmer's market are in conformity. Now, I do think it's a good idea to come up with some sort of waiver. So if in the future the farmer's market thinks that they can have complementary vendors that maybe provide non-perishable items like candles or whatever, then that's a good idea. But I think, we've been rushing, and I really appreciate all of the work that Jim and Karen and Mitch have done on this proposal. But I don't think that we're in a rush to do that. I think we just need to make it clear that everybody currently at the farmer's market is in conformity, and then we can work early next year on maybe something for our code which makes an explicit waiver for the farmer's market. And to me, that seems to be the way to proceed.
I will just say, I think it's an open question as to whether or not everyone that is currently selling is in conformity. I think the vast majority certainly are, but I think there is, and this may have been some of the issue, is that there are potentially certain vendors or certain items that vendors are currently selling that would not be exempt. So it's my understanding that based on the review of the farmer's market, which I personally did not do, but that there are recently have been vendors there that arguably do not meet the definition.
I do think that's a point of concern, and I also think straying too far from being a farmer's market is a point of concern. I mean, it was mentioned, we don't want to become a flea market, and I think we all agree we don't want to become a flea market. I had some concerns, I don't think you want too many artists. We have art galleries downtown. I think right now the farmer's market enhances what we have downtown. It enhances Lexington. I just hope the market committee never puts it in a position where it's competing with anything downtown, because as it is now, the farmer's market does get a lot of benefits that bricks and mortar type stores don't have, and it all works well. I mean, that's my only concern, is whether it's a MOU or what, just to make sure that we specify what we're looking for, that we don't want it to stray too far from being a farmer's market or farm related and things like that.
That point is well taken, but I would say, as others have pointed out, that the farmer's market has been there for 20 years and has done a very good job of curating what is there. So, if we ran into a problem in the future, we could certainly revisit it. I don't know that we need to get in the weeds and try to impose our vision of the farmer's market on the farmer's market.
Mr. Alligood.
I like the idea of no fee and have the market committee be in charge of what vendors sell things. And with the understanding that we wouldn't want to be in direct competition with existing stores and other businesses in there. And Mr. Mackey's comment earlier about items of a perishable nature being marketed there, that gets away from the flea market aspects of it. And I agree that we're not looking for a flea market there at all. But with regard to the perishable aspects, I think that's what should be sold at the farmer's market, and that would be the business of the farmer's market. No fee.
Mr. Ziegler.
I just have become more educated on farmers markets in the last couple of weeks than I ever have in my life. And I've learned about just the local ones, Broadway and Stanton and Charlottesville, and I've learned about ones in Colorado. I've learned about what happens all over the place. And I have such an appreciation for the market manager. I've learned about the fees that the vendors already pay annually via an application fee. I've learned about the fees that they already pay after each day, a percentage of their sales for your services. And those fees range, I think they're 5% in Stanton. I think it might be 2% in Lexington. I've learned that businesses are on their honor to pay the state sales tax if they are required to do so. I have learned, and I have an appreciation, and I haven't heard anyone that has been encouraging City Council to make Lexington City's farmers market harder to operate. So, I mean, that if there's one thing that I've learned, it's like, stay out of this, it's working well. So, how come we can't have a blanket peddler's fee license? We license it, the market committee, they do their thing, they're successful, and we waive the fee annually upon recommendation by the city manager or not, by a motion by one of us, just like if, God forbid, you want to rename a street, there is a fee that should be paid, and we have the prerogative to waive that fee. And so here we've got a license that they have to have. They have to have it. He shows his vendors each year, shows who they are. The market committee evaluates the applications, decides who gets to come in, and we waive the fee annually. I don't know why we can't do that, or like Mr. Alligood said, there shouldn't be a fee. It's beyond me why we would need an extra $250 from the farmer's market. If we did not have a farmer's market, can you imagine what lengths we would be going to have one? It's all about the terms, it's all about the incentives. We would be rolling out the red carpet to have the vendors, the farmers, come to our farmer's market. We've got a tremendous farmer's market and we want it to get better. So why would we ever make it harder and leave a bad taste in anyone's mouth for how the city feels about who's showing up on Wednesdays and enriching our city? So wherever we get to, I would like to direct staff, this is my preference, to get us to a place where we're not imposing fees in order for the Lexington Farmers Market to be successful.
Ms. Alexander.
Yes, I like the way that this conversation and discussion are going, because times are changing and more and more people are leaving their 8-to-5 jobs. They're leaving the brick and mortar environments, and they're becoming peddlers. They're becoming food truck vendors. They're becoming entrepreneurs and all sorts of businesses of that type. And perhaps we as a council and a staff perhaps do a review, an exercise of reviewing our licensing and our tax rates for these kinds of businesses, because I look at the listing of our taxes, and it's our merchants, our itinerant merchants and our peddlers who are paying the most. Some are paying $300 a year, some are paying $500 a year, but those who are in a regular business are paying maybe $30 a year. So there's a disconnect there, and I think that we need to rethink how we are serving the public, how we are serving those people who want to do business in Lexington. We need to be more welcoming to those who are putting Lexington on the map, actually. The farmers market is talked about all over the place, and people that are local are not the only ones who visit the farmers market. They're from all over. And I think that the image that we need to portray is that Lexington is very welcoming when it comes to whether they are entrepreneurs, whether they are peddlers, or whether they are food truck vendors. We want to see that hustle bustle in Lexington and see that vibrancy. And I think we need to take a look at how we're doing business so that it works fairly for all.
And we would want to see our farmers market grow.
Absolutely.
Mr. Smith.
I would echo something that Marilyn just said about a review of our taxing and licensing rules and regulations that we have on the books now. As it was stated, the times have changed. Maybe some adjustments need to be made in that programming. As far as the farmers market itself, through the discussions between Mitch as market manager and Jim, the city manager, have come up with what I would propose as a suitable policy as we move forward, including the $250 fee. I think it gives the vendors some buy-in on the market. It's not onerous, but it is I think it's important to have in place. It also provides the manager the authority to have a little more control or ultimate control, I guess, of what falls under the umbrella of the peddlers market, the farmers market peddlers license. Am I incorrect?
I don't see that. I think I already have control.
Well, that's what I'm saying, that you do and will continue to. Those that fall under this umbrella that we're proposing. That's accurate, correct?
I'm not sure I understand that. As far as I know, between myself and the market committee, we have guidelines for who may sell and what may sell. And having a peddler's license would not do anything for us.
Yeah, and let's limit the conversation to council. If you want to recall Mr. Wapner, I guess we have the latitude to do that, but we don't need to debate.
It's not a debate, it's a question, but I'll move on.
Thank you.
That being said, I think the language that you and the city manager have come up with as a proposal on moving forward, I think is the right way to go. I like what it said, and it I think fulfills the requests and guidelines as we move forward. I think doing nothing is probably not the best option. I prefer having a policy in place so that as we move forward, we have a much better idea where we're going. So thanks for all the work that you've put in on this, and the city manager as well, and the commissioner of revenue.
Other members of council have questions? By my unofficial nod, I think I see perhaps 4 folks that would direct city staff to work towards a farmer's market with no annual fee, and 2 members that would support the fee. If I'm not seeing that or eyeballing that correctly, let me know.
And let's clarify, that is a fee to the city, because again, every vendor already pays $100 or $125
$175
annually.
Yes,
And then
for the privilege of being.
And then 2% of their daily sales, and then they're on their honor to pay their sales tax to remit state sales tax. Look, so they are paying already.
I guess to me, I would prefer to waive the it's $250. It's not going, and I feel as though we should just create the waiver rather than try to negotiate with the farmers market over something that they really don't need, because at least as of this moment, their position, and there may be some wiggle room there, but their position is that their vendors are exempt from the peddler's license anyway because they're producing perishable items. And so I happen to agree with that position. And so I think, we're asking them to do something that they don't technically need to do. But if the city thinks it's in our best interest to have a blanket waiver for the farmers market, then yes, we should pursue that. And maybe we pursue it in January, but we're certainly not going to get that hammered out tonight.
Right.
So it's very important just to make clear that the farmers market, the vendors there currently are in conformity, everything is fine, and early next year we will maybe, as a city, work on some sort of tweak for our municipal code that makes it very explicit that if the farmers market wants to have non-perishable vendors selling candles or whatever, then they can do that on that specific location.
Well, I have you down as one of the 4 to waive the fee. I would ask the city attorney to, the Commissioner of Revenue's position on this, until we change the code, it's the Commissioner of Revenue's decision, not city council's decision as to whether there's a peddler's fee or not. And we work on a complaint basis, and I don't think anyone's complaining about the vendors at the farmers market today. And I don't anticipate anybody complaining between now and January when we have our next meeting to look at a proposed language, which currently, if city staff has questions for additional direction from council, but there are 4 members of council that would prefer to see no fee, whether that's an annual waiver or explicitly in the code acknowledging that if you're participating in the farmer's market, there is no peddler's fee required. And 2 members of council that support the $250 recommendation from the city manager, city attorney, and commissioner. So does staff have additional questions or need guidance?
I'd also ask for an opinion from the attorney, because I think if you want to waive the fee, just waive it tonight. There's no reason to come back here in January. And that's pretty clear. I don't know unless, Jared, unless you believe that there's any reason to put that in code. There's no language that needs to be written up.
Well, that goes back to the point that it's sort of an ongoing issue, a continuing concern. So in theory, we could waive it at the beginning of each year, but 3 years from now, that's probably going to get forgotten, and we're going to be back where we are now. So my thought is, while it's fresh in everyone's minds, go ahead and go through the process of making it explicit going forward, so there is no, once we've all moved on and other people are arguing the same point, they can say, well, okay, it's clearly here in black and white. We're saving sort of future folks the work of doing it, I think. And I think just generally, it's a more transparent way to do things rather than have something on the books with the expectation that the current council is going to continue waiving it, when obviously we all know that the makeup of future councils might be different. So that would be my suggestion, is go ahead tonight, waive any peddler's fee until we could, whatever we want to say, end of January. Make that sort of analogous to the community festival or the artist events where we waive them on a sort of a one-time thing. Waive that basically until we get something new on the books. I don't see any problem with that to get us to where we actually can get something on the books. But I do think we should have something in code addressing the issue. And then, not to further perhaps prolong the discussion, but I think structurally, in terms of crafting an ordinance, it's important and maybe philosophically important to know if if council's position is there should be no fee or there should be a fee that then can be waived. Because we handle that a little bit differently. If there's no fee, then there's no fee. Whereas if we want to put in there that there is a fee that is then waived, that's a different way to do it. So it probably sounds like a distinction without a difference, but there is I promise you there's a structural reason for me asking the question.
That's why we have you sitting at the end of the table to guide us and hopefully to avert future problems. But if I'm hearing you correctly, it would be appropriate for council's consideration if someone wanted to make a motion to waive the peddler's license for all farmers market participants for perhaps the next 6 months or until an update in the code.
I move.
Have a motion?
I move that we waive the fee. There'll be no fee until more than 6 months, just in general. Just there'll be no fee for farmers market activity. And that the vendors will be coordinated through the market committee.
Well, I do think, as Frank suggested, it would be good to have the 6-month thing because that will force us to fix the code and put it in there. So I think if you could amend that with
A friendly amendment there to put a 6-month timer on it.
Great. I will second that.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I
Mr. Ziegler.
appreciate the input from the community. It is not lost on me in the last 3 months, we've heard from the community about when to do trick or treating. And now we've heard from the community on when and how to operate our farmers market. We live in a wonderful little city. There's a lot of problems in the world. There's a lot of problems in Lexington, but we're dealing with trick or treating and the farmers market in the last 3 months. It's not lost on me.
Mr. Smith.
I'd prefer waiving the fee just until we get the code adjusted and have a policy in place. And then talk about fee wavering after that. The $250 was proposed by the market manager. There must be a reason behind that, other than it's less than the $500 peddler's fee. So I prefer it that way until we get a policy in place and can talk about waiving a market peddler's fee at that point. But I'm okay with waiving peddler's fee at the farmer's market until then.
Is that the motion that we are voting on?
I heard we're waiving peddler's fees for 6 months.
Or until.
Is there an or in there?
Or until we pass a change to our municipal code addressing the issue.
Mr. Alligood, is that the intention of your motion, is to waive the peddler's fee for any participants in the farmer's market for 6 months or until city council changes their code?
Exactly, and vendors are subject to the market committee who participate in the farmer's market.
Correct, as is the terms that we're currently operating under.
Correct. So waive the fee 6 months or until we come up with other better language and vendors subject to the market committee decisions.
I don't think that last part we can, I don't think we have any control over that last part. I could be wrong. So I might drop that last part. I mean, I think that's up to the farmer's market, not our imposition of.
The piece concerning Mr. Alligood's add-on. Let me make a statement, and you tell me if you support it or if you need to modify it.
Give it a try.
Your motion is to waive the peddler's fee for any participants of the Lexington Farmers Market for 6 months or until City Council passes a new code pertaining to this issue?
Absolutely correct.
Thank you, sir. We have a motion and a second from Dennis.
Second.
Any further discussion? Mr. Smith?
I guess it's semantics, but I'm misunderstanding why the 6 months is in there. If it takes longer than 6 months, does that mean we start charging peddlers fees?
No, the 6 months is in there to force us to actually get this accomplished in 6 months, which we will. I'm hopeful that we can get it done in the first couple of months.
I would certainly hope so as well. Ultimately, we will have new code. Again, it's semantics. Never mind.
I would suggest in response to your question, Mr. Smith, pandemics happen, accidents happen, and something could happen to our city staff, our city attorney. Don't wish it on them, but it could be delayed. But I think there's every expectation that city staff will come back with a code recommendation defining, which may be our next question, whether all participants are exempt from peddler's fee going forward in the farmer's market. And I pose that as in the form of a question to council to give further direction, as the city attorney asked, which direction you prefer. But if we can give clear direction tonight, I anticipate the city attorney will be able to come back to us in January for something to consider, and the 6 months will be meaningless. Thus the reason of or 6 months or a change in the code, because sometimes we overcomplicate things and take a little bit longer to get them right. So, members of council, if you could express yourselves on your desire to have a waiver for all participants of the farmer's market, or to waive annually or waive the peddler's fee. Jared, straighten me out.
Just, we've got the motion pending on the 6 month waiver, 6 month or until the ordinance passes waiver. So I think we need to vote on that and then come back to the
Thank you, sir.
ongoing fee or no fee.
Have a motion, second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, would ask for a roll call vote. Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Ziegler? Aye. Mr. Ayers?
Aye.
Ms. Strawn?
Aye.
Mr. Alligood?
Aye.
Ms. Alexander?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you all very much. Do you need additional direction, Jared, on that last item? If you could say it more eloquently than I did.
Just the structural question of, do you want to impose a fee that is then presumably waived annually? Or do you just want to put in there, if you're a vendor at the farmer's market, there's no fee, and just leave it at that?
Do we need to,
I didn't mean to interrupt, but I will just say imposing a fee and then waiving, I think ultimately is more flexible for council than just putting in there, there's no fee. You'd have to go back in and craft an ordinance or revise the ordinance again if you wanted to impose a fee. But again, it's more, we can go either way. We just need to choose which way we want to go tonight.
Mr. Smith?
As the market manager has proposed a fee, I prefer the fee be in the language and give us the option to waive it instead of realizing maybe 3-5 years down the road that we actually do need a fee. And to the city attorney's point, would have to redraft an ordinance including a fee.
Well, I would.
Point of order. Mitch, if you want to address Chuck's question, if you could step to the podium and let him know how you feel about your fee.
Yes, I am not in favor of a $250 fee or a $500 fee. I'm in favor, and what I suggested was that we waive the fees. If that was not acceptable to the council, I am willing to live with the fee, and $250 is what I suggested as a maximum reasonable fee. Not what I was suggesting we do, but if we had no other alternative, we could live with.
Thank you, Mitch. Dennis?
Yeah, for my part, if you're looking for direction, I agree. I feel like we should waive the fee. I feel like that this has gone on for several weeks and we have put the participants in the farmer's market through enough. And I think a waiver makes sense. So that would be my suggestion.
Thank you, Dennis. Other members of council want to weigh in? or have any objection to directing the city attorney to simply waive the fee for all participants of the farmer's market?
I would be in support of waiving the fee for all participants, farmers market,
Thank
which
you.
is consistent with what I've been saying all night.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Hearing no objection, I hope you have your guidance.
Well, I just want to be clear that we're saying the same thing. You're saying waive the fee. That implies that a fee is imposed and then waived. When I think the thrust of the discussion is, the position has been there should be no fee. And that's why I'm asking in terms of crafting the ordinance, there is a distinction between there's no fee imposed, period, full stop, versus there is a fee that is then waived.
Is there a way to basically say that any participants solely participating in the farmer's market are exempt from the peddler's license?
Yes, which would be no fee.
Okay, would be my suggestion.
Okay, and that is imposing no fee, not a fee waiver.
Correct.
Correct.
And that would be simpler to accomplish what I think we're proposing to accomplish.
City manager.
I believe what the city attorney, as I understood, was saying, and the consent of council is that currently, if you are a non-exempt peddler, there is a peddler's license to do business in the city. Now, there's many vendors who are exempt, but should one show up who is not exempt, they currently have to pay the license. So what you would have to do is waive the fee for any peddler's license at the farmer's market, so that no peddler, exempt or otherwise, would pay at the farmer's market. You don't want to waive the entire fee, because if they're somewhere else, they should pay that fee. But if at the farmer's market, they're non-exempt, the license is waived there.
I think the intent that I hear from council is that anybody who participates in the farmer's market would not be required to have a peddler's fee. And I'm hearing you say they may participate in that and go someplace else in the city and sell, and they would need to have a peddler's license. And so just because if you are participating in the farmer's market, there is no peddler's fee required, I think is the spirit and intention of council.
Good clarification. On Wednesdays, if you're selling at the farmer's market, you don't need the peddler's license. If you decide to sell on Friday somewhere else or Saturday, I mean, you're exactly right. Good clarification.
Absolutely. Mr. Alligood.
So we should vote the original motion down and restate the motion, or can we amend
That
it?
is incorrect. We're just giving guidance to the city attorney on what to craft to bring back to us in January.
Okay, so, very good.
But good question. Yes, Ms. Strawn.
I definitely don't want to belabor this, and I may be the only one who feels this way, but, you know, what we have this definition of peddler, and one of the good things about it is that it does somewhat give city guidance as to what should be at a farmer's market. You know, if you meet this criteria, you're allowed to be at a farmer's market without a peddler's license. We do have this gray area where we do have, and I think Mr. Mackey may have sort of been getting at this point, but we do have some vendors who are sort of in this gray area that we don't want to keep having problems with, so we're going down this path. I still have a little concern about just totally ignoring this definition of peddler, is that we lose control about what happens to the farmer's market. I know the committee's doing a great job, and there have been a couple of instances in the past. Wasn't there T-shirts or something sold that caused a bit of a problem? I do have a little bit of concern about you not giving some guidance on what happens there, and I know some of you have said anything is good, and I don't agree with that. I think it needs to be kept mostly a farmer's market, and then, like I said before, not competing. You know, I don't want artists competing with downtown businesses, but it should all enhance. So I just have a little bit of problem going down this path and allowing anything at the farmer's market.
Well, I would suggest this doesn't allow anything at the farmer's market. Anything that qualifies for the farmer's market would be exempt from the peddler's license.
Right, but we lose that ability. I mean, it's only the market manager in his committee that decides that by their rules of what the market rules.
So, they're operating subject to the city regs, and I'll look to the city attorney for this. We continue to operate on a complaint basis. So if someone shows up with mattresses from Schul's to sell at the farmer's market, first step is the farmer's market should not allow them to participate. But if there's an error and they are allowed to participate, someone could come forward and say, this is outside the confines of a farmer's market, and excuse that vendor or assess the peddler fee.
Right, it would be the latter. It would be, we're crafting it as if they're a farmer's market vendor, the answer to the mattresses would be the farmer's market says you can't sell here, they keep selling. Say, you can keep selling, but now you're a peddler because you're not part of the farmer's market. And you would charge a peddler's fee for the mattresses because they're not part of the farmer's market. But I think to Leslie's point, I think Jim's and I sort of vision for all of this is not to change the management and oversight and vendor, who can be a vendor, leave that in the hands of the farmer's market committee based on their track record as well as their internal guidelines, knowing that if it does become a problem, if all of a sudden, things change and it becomes a flea market, that the city can always come back as part of the process that we're going through now, essentially, and tighten down on what is considered, actually define a farmer's market vendor. But I think, again, Jim and I's, and we can change that. We could, if it's council's desire to go ahead and do that tonight, or as part of this ordinance process, that we want to sort of get involved and more clearly define and delineate for the farmers market committee who they can allow in, we could do that. But we try generally, I think, if it ain't broke, don't fix it at this point. But there's nothing that we're doing tonight that's going to preclude us in the future from coming back and tightening down if we need to.
Which I think just stating that and making that clear, I mean, I think we're on the same page, but just in case anybody gets the bright idea to expand what the market is, I hope that message at least is getting through this conversation. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Strong.
No.
It's not a public forum, but a public meeting. Mary Ellen, love you, and I would welcome whatever you have to say. I'll put you on the clock for the 3 minutes, but please state your name and address for the record.
Mary Ellen Cook, 4 North Lewis Street. Anything else?
No, ma'am.
That's it. Okay. I just want to know, listening to the back and forth conversation, whether Mitch ever had to refuse a vendor approaching him, and whether that and for what reason he did that. Because I think that's what we're talking about. Who has control over who actually gets to sell it?
Yeah, I would encourage you to seek Mitch out after the meeting and find out. And I'll remind all of us that Mitch has done an admirable job for a number of years, but he hasn't always been the market manager over the past 17 years or 20 years, I think Don has further indicated, and probably won't be for the next 20 years. But if you are, thank you for your service in advance. But there is an element of trust. And again, we work on a complaint driven. So if things are not going as they should, the city stands to support the market manager in discerning, and always has the city attorney and city manager available to ask, are solar panels acceptable? Is selling farm insurance acceptable at the farmer's market? And I just pose those as hypothetical questions because I don't know the answer to them. I'll leave that to sharper minds. Ms. Alexander.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that I think that Mitch will get it right the first time because he doesn't want to go through this again.
Indeed, indeed. I think by evidence of Public Works working to make the space available every week for the farmers market, and the parking lot being available to the farmers market, and the rare occasion when someone doesn't read the sign that says you can't park here on Wednesdays, the police offer support. And so the city has historically, and I know will continue to be, very supportive of a thriving and vibrant farmers market. And grateful for all the work by all of staff and council. I'm sure council members will get a flood of thank yous from the same folks that ridiculed you for your ridiculous endeavors in the past few weeks. But reminded that no farmers, no food. So we're grateful for the efforts of all of our farmers in keeping us well fed. I don't think there's anything else under that new business. Staff has guidance. We had a motion and a vote, I think, but I welcome. Are we settled?
I think we can move on, personally.
We did vote it, and it was a unanimous vote of your motion.
Okay.
We do have a brief closed meeting that the city manager has requested. The topic, Ms. Alexander, I think you have the information, will read us in. I do not anticipate that we will be taking any action after the closed session, but we will reopen the meeting and conclude our meeting. But Ms. Alexander, if you'll read us into the closed session.
I move that Lexington City Council will convene in closed meeting in accordance with Section 2.2-3711, subsection A, paragraph 3 of the Code of Virginia, a closed session for the purpose of discussing the disposition of real estate for a public purpose.
Second?
Thank you. We have a second. We have a roll call vote. Ms. Strawn?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Sigler?
Aye.
Mr. Ayers?
Aye.
Mr. Alligood?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.